Hello, dear Nicole. A warm welcome and a warm welcome to everyone here. Dear Nicole, you will be leading our next retreat again. And you also led our last retreat, which was so well received that we're able to have you back again. And we are really, really thankful and happy about it. Yeah, you are the vice abbot and head teacher of two Dharma Sangha practice centers. The Zen Buddhistisches Center Schwarzwald, which is located in the Black Forest in Germany, and the Creston Mountain Center in Colorado, USA. I also write something down so I get it right here. You are, and please, if I don't say it right, just tell me. Yeah, you are the Dharma successor of Zen Tatsudo Roshi in the Dharma Sangha Soto Zen lineage of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, author of the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And the retreat theme you choose will be awakening body, speech, and mind. And now I would like to give you the floor, dear Nicole.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And by the way, and welcome everyone. I see some familiar faces. Some of you I've had the pleasure to meet in our last retreat in January. It was nice to see you again. And by the way, that what you just said made me realize I probably have to update my profile on the internet. I'm even the abbot now of our two centers.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
This big transitional ceremony. Yeah, so what that means is basically same kind of job, but just with a lot more responsibility. Yeah, so I always really enjoy small group gatherings, like we have apparently the opportunity to speak with each other today in a fairly small circle. So from my point of view, we can just have the whole thing interactive if you wish. I'm happy to just give you an introduction into the topic, the way that I envision it right now. And I should say up front that the way I work is, especially with the topic, is the topic becomes my lived life at some point. It's like, in this case, awakening body, speech, and mind. When I practice with a title like that, I inhabit the title day and night for several weeks, kind of like in the vicinity of the event when we're going to meet and gather in the name of this title. So what that also means is that for me, it's going to have a whole new lived dimension the closer we get to the event. And then especially we're going to, for those of you who I hope will attend the retreat in January, we will make the title what it is together. In other words, in Zen, that's just like a general principle. Topics aren't out there, they aren't external realities. They aren't content like in a textbook or something that now you just learn or study, but they are locations to be inhabited. And how we will, in our particular retreat, inhabit the topic and the locations of body, speech, and mind, and the awakening of body, speech, and mind, that will be up for discovery. So just to say, we can do easily kind of just gather around that topic today, but do not think that it's going to be kind of like a curriculum which we will then work through. In January, I think we'll be very open for exploration and discovery as it comes up. But of course, I can say just a few basic principles up front for tonight. Again, please do feel free to just raise your hand and ask questions or interact if you wish. I also have a short, small exercise, just a kind of guided, we could call it maybe a meditation that we can do together tonight, just as a little experiential taste. And then since we are a small group like this, I think we don't need to split up into even smaller groups. Otherwise, we can meet in 9 little phone cells. So maybe phone booths. So maybe we just stay in this group and then just share about if you've had any notions or experiences from the meditation. Is that okay? So far, so good. Yeah, okay. Any wishes in addition to that? I guess not. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I wrote this description for the course. And what I'd like to do, at least some points that you find already in there, I'd just like to give some depth to what's in there, just kind of go through that with you. Have some of you read the description of this course already, or is that new territory? So some of you have. Okay, all right. So first of all, one thing just to know is that body, speech, and mind is one of the completely traditional topics in Shingon practice, that's Japanese Buddhism, but just in traditional Buddhist practice in general. And what you find a lot in Buddhism is lists of 3 things, of 5 things, of 7 things, of 8 things, sometimes of 16 things, sometimes of 32 things. Buddhists like lists. And these lists they keep dividing the worlds of our experience in different ways. Each list, or usually a list, is going to have the feeling in it to be a pretty complete or completing, sometimes complete or completing way of entering a particular question. And the body, speech, and mind list, so to speak, is a list, I would call it, about the manifestations of our existence. How does we exist, obviously. We exist as individuals, we exist together. And so the body, speech, and mind little list asks the question of how does this complex existence, how does it manifest? What are the territories of the complexity of this existence? And you could list other things to respond to that question. How does existence, like if you think of say your dog or your friend, it doesn't matter, just any living being, how does their existence, in what categories does their existence manifest? Well, you could say, oh, it manifests in their gender, it manifests in their opinions, it manifests in their bodily shape or something. But no, this list says it manifests in 3 territories: body, speech, and mind. And so I think one approach I'm going to be taking, and what I think we ought to, that will be worthwhile looking at, is how have you ever thought of yourself as existing in these 3 territories? Have you ever thought of yourself as, oh, I myself exists as a body, exists as communication and expression, and exists as mind? Or maybe is it rather some feeling, no, wait, my existence is me, and I have a body, I have a mind, and I speak. What's your inner view of what the you-ness of what your existence is? And what I suggest is that most of us, and maybe a little bit more in our individualized and individualizing Western cultures, that we may subsume the territories, the wide and vast, and as Buddhism says, mysterious territories of body, speech, and mind. We may be a little quick in just, what's the word, like cramping, pushing them all into the small category of self. Oh, it's just me, and I have a body and I have a mind, but it's all just me. So for a retreat in which we're going to explore body, speech, and mind, which the Buddhist idea is awakening body, speech, and mind. Actually, in the traditional texts, I don't even know, I don't think I necessarily have that in my original description, but we'll get there, is you discover each as a mystery. You can discover the mystery of the body. You discover the mystery of speech. You discover the mystery of the mind. So awakening also means to kind of open these territories into their existence in a much wider way. It's not just my body. It's not just my mind. It's a mysterious body connected with all other bodies in mysterious ways. It's a wide, mysterious mind connected with all other minds in mysterious ways. And speech is a way of expressing and changing together with all of sentience, not just with your neighbor and other people in your human cultural community. So we want to open, in other words, we want to open these three territories into their vastness, ideally, have some experience of opening the body into its own vastness, experiencing the vastness of our body, experiencing the vastness of our mind, and experiencing the vastness of communication and speech. And so that journey is in the background, or is assumed, if we're going to enter the topic of body, speech, and mind. Yeah. And then so just one kind of obvious thing to notice, but that is one entry into the topic to make it like, pull it away out of it being a philosophical exploration into like a personal exploration, is you can try and start pondering the question, how are body, speech, and mind connected? Like, how do you find that in yourself? You know what your body is, right? I mean, and we may know to some extent what our mind is. And we know what speech is, right? So we can maybe have some wider idea. But if you first start observing your own existence, as I said, manifestations of existence. If you start just observing your existence from the point of view of bodies interacting, like your body right now is very physically interacting with the surface of whatever you're sitting on. Body is always in a context with very specific other bodies, be they sentient or insentient. There's a flower behind you, Yael, for instance, and your body surely is relating to that flower. So there's a bodily relationship with everything that's around it. And one very interesting question, since also the retreat will be, there will be an online version, one-line way to participate, is how do bodies relate with each other? How do bodies interact with geographical distance, but digital connectedness? What is that? I mean, not that there are such specific answers, but to be asking the questions I'm suggesting will bring us closer to inhabiting our own existence in wider ways. So anyways, there's you can just stay with that for a little while. What is it to be a body? What is it to inhabit this body in a physical world of like materiality, of matter, of other bodies? And then you can do the same thing I always suggest, and the lists in Buddhism, that's another thing to know, their sequence is almost always quite intentional. Like in a Buddhist list like that, you'll almost always have a pretty good reason to start with one thing and then see how that opens into the next, and then see how that opens into the next. And then very often you can start looping back. Once you have discovered speech, once you have discovered the body in a new way, you can then explore speech differently. Once you have discovered the speech that actually comes from the body, you get a different entry into what mind is. Once you have that new entry into mind, you can loop back into exploring the body, and you'll find new dimensions in the body. So it's an ever widening kind of spiral movement in which completing each round will almost open a new dimension or a new feeling, and starting anew. Oh, the body. Okay. Yeah. So maybe that just as a first few words about a list like that, and just kind of bringing attention to our existence in these categories. And then let me maybe just say, from the description that I wrote, so much of it, and since we have this kind of short time this evening, I'll keep it at that almost at the level of feeling the direction maybe of what a retreat like this can be, rather than going into each detail very specifically. But here's a quote that I've always loved from my teacher, Baker Roshi, in which he says, "Zen practice helps us to notice what we already are." So that's what we just did. We're just noticing what we already are. And then he says, and what we already are is connected to what we want to be in the deepest sense. So there's another truth here. There's what we already are. And yes, I mean, I would think for almost each of us, there's some feeling of who I want to be, who I wish to be in the deepest sense. And that ideally, I mean, there's lots of suffering when we experience what we want to be as very separate and far away from what we are, right? That's a pretty annoying state of mind if we think, oh, who I want to be is totally not who I am. Has anyone ever experienced such a dissatisfying state of mind? So, ideally, and that's what Baker Roshi is saying here too, the craft, ideally, first of all, what we want is very much located in the territory of what we already are. And then he says the craft then is to open those connections, the connections between what we already are and what we want to be. Bring those two into a just kind of like a beautiful dialogue, and let what we are, putting that into a continuous feeling of unfolding without, like Suzuki Roshi, Baker Roshi's teacher. That's what lineage is all about. But Suzuki Roshi, Baker Roshi's teacher, is one of his very famous statements is, he said, supposedly, in the midst of a meditation retreat, when everyone was like in meditation retreats, you can really experience a lot of pain because we sit in Zen, we sit in a typical sesshin is what it's called. We sit for 7 days. Sometimes the wake up bell is at like 3:30 a.m. This is not exactly designed to be fun, but it's designed to be potentially transformative. So the wake up is super early at 3:30 a.m. in a traditional Zen retreat. I mean, in a sesshin at least. And then you sit meditation for up to like 15 hours a day. And even adept meditators, that hurts our knees for sure, our knees and our backs and so forth. So it's a pretty, like, you don't usually, because you don't do anything but just sitting in a posture. It's unlike sitting in a chair where you can which can be an unhealthy position. Usually in a meditation position, your joints are fairly open and so forth. So it's not like you're not doing any damage to your body, but you sure are flushing out tensions throughout the body. And so in the midst of such a retreat, and they were all, I'm always imagining the people there in the meditation hall were struggling, and they were just like, oh my God, how am I going to survive the next half hour? Suzuki Roshi came in and he said, looked around, kind of walked around. And then he said, supposedly, you know, you are each perfect just as you are. And then he paused and he said, but you also know you can all need a little improvement. That's a kind of, it's a kind of typical, it's a, there's a practice in Buddhism that, you know, a lot of people when we, and I don't know, you may have that in MBSR as well. There's always that, there's a kind of, which oftentimes asked as an either or question. Well, is it acceptance or is it change? As if the two were contradictory. In Buddhist thinking, they are totally not contradictory, and I'm sure in MBSR they aren't. So the idea is from within profound acceptance. It's acceptance that opens the possibility and the inspiration for wholesome changing that just is a way of unfolding and flourishing in this life. So anyways, it's the craft then is to open those connections between what we already are and what we want to be. Okay. So I said, and then maybe we can from here also just do our little exploration that I thought we could do today. I read this one paragraph, like today in our meeting, as I said, it's not a coincidence that the list starts with the body. So let's just do a little exploration on the experience of the body and body, speech, and mind. And what I wrote in the description is, we will experientially explore the body from within the experience of the body. Okay, so just let's pause there for a short moment. I'll claim, and you guys are already, I would assume, rather trained. I do know for a lot of people that arrive in practicing Zen, it's a big shift when a person learns to feel their body from within. And that I'm saying that in contrast to having some kind of mental image of one's body. Do you know what I mean? A mental image of one's body versus experiencing the body from within, just as a simple way to say, we all have an image of our hand, right? You can imagine your hand. We have an idea of what our hand looks like. And I'm assuming sometimes I've wondered actually, but I think I would recognize my hand. Like if I have some thought experiment, if my hand was on if I just saw a picture and there was a pile of other arms and hands that were all together, I think I would be able from that picture to say, oh, that's my hand, right? So we have some familiarity and some image of what our hand looks like from the outside. But if we bring attention to our hand, and when we just start describing, you can even do it right now, and you start feeling into if I bring attention to my hand, into my hand, and I close my eyes, I can even make some effort to drop or forget about the image of the hand. I forget about what it looks like from the outside, but I just feel the space like which the hand is in space somehow. So like I can just feel the space of the hand and feel the attention in the space that contains the hand. And if I was to now draw what I feel I might get a very different picture. You can kind of see if you can imagine something there. What would it look like? Even take a couple breaths or something. What would it look like if you were to draw what you feel? Not what you know your hand looks like, but would there be different colors? Like, for instance, what would what's called the palm of your hand? What would that look like if you were to draw it? What would that, if you draw the fingers? Or are there even fingers, or is there just a different kind of space? And what about the space between the so-called fingers? Again, are there different colors in the territory of your hand, and are there really 5 distinct fingers, or what is that like? So maybe already at this, again, since if you can keep feeling into that a little longer, but also since we do have the kind of, for me, it's always a benefit of being a fairly small group. Anybody have any observations they want to share? Is the outer hand the same as the felt hand, or does the felt hand, would that amount to a different kind of picture than your outer hand? What do you think? What do you feel?
Does anyone would like to share something? Hi, Martina.
Hi, Martina.
I mean, I could, yeah, just unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Welcome.
it's okay. For me, it's completely different. Like the shape of my hand was not there at all. Maybe sometimes it comes, but it it was like different energies. It would be, if I would draw it, there would be different lines that are going like that, and softness in it, and also the space between the fingers would get another color, and I would have problem with I would like to draw with transparent colors, but I wouldn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I noticed when I was kind of being present with the outer sense of my hand, there was a real sort of stillness, but a real busyness on the inside. It was really tingling and just loads of the kind of whispers of sensation, but there was a lot going on.
Like it would be in the inner hand, it's almost like you couldn't even draw a picture because it keeps changing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that problem. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just going to add, it was interesting. I first, kind of felt the inner structure, and that's no doubt part of the, just medical background of seeing like the skeleton. And then it just
turned into energy, like you were saying, it just was all energy kind of flowing out. But around this structure and the realization of all that can do, that energetic hand. And then the mention of the palm was like it brought a kind of a softness, like a dropping in of, of holding, of all that can be kind of held, just and then it went broader, from not just holding in the hand, but holding in the whole body, this kind of, but it felt like the palm of a hand. So unusual, interesting, touching.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm always struck I think my inner hand would be pretty useless at the tasks of the world, because I don't even have my inner hand keeps not really having distinct fingers. It just kind of has this, like there are certain gloves that have that in German they are called fist gloves. And it's a little, my inner hand is like, doesn't, like this is all filled with sentience. All these spaces are filled with sentience. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well that kind of exploration, and obviously we're just doing it with the hand, but it can be done with the entire body. And I know, we do body scans, be it in Buddhist practice, be it in MBSR, so we're very familiar with exploring the body from within. I do think it's worthwhile to actually acknowledge or notice how radically different the territory is of the mental image of the hand or the body, how radically different that is. It's really like a different territory of what we are, different kind of manifestation. The body from within, or in this case, what we just kind of did now, the hand as experienced from within. So now here we already have, but both is the body. So here we already have just within the category of the body. Now here we already have two wildly distinct experiential territories. And what I'm going to suggest, and that will be a whole thing, I think, to the extent that I can predict the future, which I tend to not be able to do, but I think that will probably be to notice, which I think is the case, that we tend to tame down the wildness of our experienced body with body images. In other words, that by holding a pretty strong mental image, in this case of our hand, like the question is, why don't we always experience our hand in that wild way, in that busy way, as Phoebe said? Why isn't there always going so much on in our bodies? And yes, first of all, that would be impractical. If there was, as I said, it's like I wouldn't be able to function if I had that much to notice all the time. But at the same time, why is it not, for most people, not just always a completely accessible way of experiencing our own existence, right? So I think like one hypothesis or one exploration I want to do is what happens if we actually, by distinguishing the mental image of the body from the body as experienced from within, what I'm going to suggest is that is a way of setting the experiential body free, setting it free almost from the concepts of the body. And that can actually liberate something in us. That's going to be one, I think, stream within the upcoming retreat. And so then the next step would be, and we're going to go through that again very with lots of time and probably one day after another. My guess is that we'll be spending quite a bit of time really just with the body, because that is the basis then for opening into what's meant by speech, really, what's meant by mind. So I think we'll really take time in establishing and freeing the body from its categories, from our self-images, from being owned by the self even. That's another kind of liberation of the body. Does the body really need to be owned by the self? And that's partly, you know, so much is happening in our heads. We have this particular kind of grammar, be it in English or in German, in many Western languages, where the sentence structure, the grammar itself, grammar, by the way, for those who haven't spent time with that, I think is fascinating. Grammar reflects and manifests world views, I think. I mean, grammar is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. We have a grammar in English and in German and in French that basically depends on a subject, predicate, or verb, and object distinction. In Japanese or East Asian languages don't have that, for instance. In Japanese, you don't have a body. You do not have a body. Like, what the Japanese think, that's another thing Suzuki Roshi used to be really kind of annoyed by, that people would keep speaking of like their stomach or their hand. In Japanese, there is no such grammar. My hand, my stomach. It's like, it's just stomach exists. Stomach stomachs. Stomach does the activity of stomaching. Hand does the activity of handing. It doesn't require a self that owns all that stuff. What's that self going to do with all that stuff anyways? So you can, in other grammars, in other languages, you don't even have to free the body from the self, because they don't assume that the body is in any way owned by the self in the first place. But our grammar just assumes that. So we don't know how to not assume that. Because even like we wouldn't even know how to say the alternative. So I think that's one important point to, there are several ways, layers, I think, of liberating the experienced body from the self-owned body, from the conceptualized body, and also from the culturally, I think, oftentimes limited body. You know, then there are all these cultural views that are culturally associations. I mean, nowadays there's such big societal movements around views on gender and all that. So there may be, if we do this kind of practice, questions like that are going to come up around our bodily identity and the freedom from these categories. Much more fluidity. We're just a sentient existence. Why do we need to have all these separating categories? So anyways, that's one aspect, to free the experiential body. And now, once that is more or less, like once there is a feeling for that, once that is established, the body as experienced from within, now a whole new path, which deeply relates to the quote I read in the beginning. Now we can start engaging a kind of inner dialogue of unfolding and flourishing, which has to do with what I call, in Baker Roshi actually has established this term. He talks about the imaginal body. Not the imagined, but imaginal, which has a similarity in English to the idea of visualizations. And you may know, I mean, there are so many different Buddhist schools. The well-known school is the Tibetan school. I'm from the Zen school. That's a different, very different ball game. But in the Tibetan school, they work a lot more with visualizations, in the sense of like, they visualize with Buddha figures, for instance. We don't do that in Zen. We do something, we visualize more. Okay, so I'm gonna have to kind of put this together in a certain way. Maybe you can imagine that the more you inhabit the experienced body, the body as experienced from within, just like we did now with our hands, you may start also at some point the movements within that experienced alive body, that aliveness has a kind of direction. It's a little bit like if I feel into my spine, and just the torso and the spine, even when, which like for now I've spent all day on a chair, like right now there's quite a bit of tension in my back. And my spine, it feels a little bit like it's a little forward kind of. So when I feel into, see, there's that darn grammar again, when the spine feels itself, when there's an experience of just like, oh, the aliveness of the torso, of the spine, then I can feel the tension. That's the whole, like what we already are right now, what I already am has many different aspects to it, but also one is there's some tension in my shoulders and in my spine. So there is what we already are, but what I already am knows what it could feel like. It knows its own freedom in this case from tension. It's almost as if what it is, it knows inside itself. It knows its own potential. Even the contracted or like a little, what's the word? Like a little pushed down spine that we can sometimes have. Even that spine knows in itself what it would feel like to lift up and to open up. And sometimes that is why tension hurts so much, because there's that dissonance between what I feel, what it could be like, the absence of that tension, and then the presence of that tension. So in the presence of the tension is also the knowledge of the absence of the tension. It's not actually separate from the presence of the tension. We'll spend a lot of time with that principle. That's psychologically deeply important. It makes a huge difference if you think that you're separate from your potential. What I am is not what I want to be. That's always true by definition. But it's also true by definition, what I want to be, what my spine wants to be, is already present in what it is. It's already in it. Makes a huge like psychological and actually practical difference. So you're awakening the potential of your body from within the actuality, the reality of your body. So you're starting that kind of dialogue where what it is, what it feels like, can open up to also its own liberation, what it could be, what it wants to be. I think, I mean, for me, that's even the much stronger way of saying it, what it wants to be. So then that's practicing with what I called in my little description text, the imaginal body practice, where like we can imagine, and that's a typical practice in Buddhism, what is the body of a Buddha? And you're not asking yourself in a kind of abstract theological sense or anything. You're really asking your own body, this body, what if this body awakens? What would that awakening be? And you don't, one needs to give, we call it incubatory time. You can't just then jump to conclusions and let your mind take over and produce different kind of answers or concepts. No, you have to actually kind of sit and feel with such a question. What is the liberation of this body? What is the potential of this body? What is the freedom? What is the deepest sense, the deepest request of what this body wants to be? Like that, you can start introducing those questions into your own bodily practice. And then they aren't ideas, and they aren't a self-improvement project, but they are becoming an opening into the directions of our aliveness. So all that, that's a fine chemistry and how we're opening into the direction and the path of our own aliveness. Yeah, yeah. If you want to, we could I do think we have a little bit more time. If you want to, I could offer one that's for me super experimental. I've never done this exercise before, but we could continue with the one we just did and add an imaginal idea to it. You up for it? Looks like it. So let's do that. Great.
Sure.
Great. So so again, you return and feel free to close your eyes. Just forget any language or ideas of what's just been said. But simply be there, be here. You're here. Relax. And again, I invite you, and you may invite your attention to just be present in your hands. Bring attention to your hand. You can see it. Bring presence and attention, maybe, to your hand. And as we just did, now revisiting the hand, it may be there's almost already an established channel since we've just done that. It's like the hand already knows, oh yeah, here's that presence again. And again, you just connect with the feeling of the hand as it experiences itself from within. It needs no words required. You just connect with the maybe changing sensations of the hand, this hand experiencing itself. And just take 3 or 4 breaths presencing within the presence of this hand. Now, in the so-called imaginal body practice, we can add feelings. It's like our attention is a little like a vehicle or like a vessel through which we can add particular intentions, qualities, or feelings into our body, in this case, in our hand. So you can now bring, if you want, to the imagination of what would be the hand of, say, a healer. What if this was a healing hand? What would this hand feel like as a healing hand? Just hold the idea of healing in the space of your hand. It's like as if the idea of healing had its own kind of presence. Almost as if your hand was discovering, what could that be? Can ask itself that question. A healing hand. Every hand, by the way, is a healing hand. There are studies about that nowadays. Every hand is actually a healing hand. Your hand, this hand, is also a healing hand. What if that quality was awakened, is awakened? As a real presence. And again, just take a few breaths, maybe 5 breaths or so, and say something in just a minute or so to end this exercise, but let's just be each of us in our own felt space for a few breaths. If you want to, you can let your hand travel a little bit. See if there's some part of your body, be it your leg or a place on your torso. If you want to bring the feeling of this healing hand somehow in relationship to another part of your body, either touching or with a little bit of distance if you wish, whatever may feel good to you right now. And then in your own time, I suggest you use your other hand to touch the hand that we've now just been bringing attention to. And massage it a little bit. And then when you're ready, release that exercise. Just by exhaling, you can release this exercise. Exploration, actually, I should call it. Yeah, any notions, observations with that one? Did that make a difference to bring in the intention or the notion of healing? Or maybe it didn't. Also possible. Go ahead, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it did make a difference. big difference. And one of the first thing I noticed was that it made the connection with the heart,
Yeah.
and that it expressed itself also in terms of energy, which anyway I realized in the beginning of the exercise before you gave that. Now I had completely other energy even before the suggestion to like it was a kind of dance inside of it was but when we came with the intention, it took together with the energies qualities that I found myself give it names, qualities like steady, brave, feeling what's is necessary, being there, all kind of, yeah, like qualities that came together with the energy and the imaging of the energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
It was good, amazing to do, beautiful.
I'm amazed if I do this right now. This one hand is super warm. This hand is quite cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else who'd like to share something? It's okay if not. It's actually, I'm wondering, there's maybe two things to say about this particular. One is I'm totally experimenting with how to do the imaginal part. Another way would be, and if you want to ever do that just on your own, because since this, like, you can do it while you're driving even, or while you're, well, maybe not while you're driving, but while you're just in the midst of your, like, you're waiting for something or whatever. Another way to do it is to do it more specific, which is like just to say and name a particular quality that we all know. Like I could have said, bring warmth into your hand. I could have done that. That would have been very specific and something that we all know what that feels like. We all know what warmth feels like. And that, I think, again, in the retreat too, I want to play a little bit with very specific qualities. And then also with, that's another way to go, is to not name any particular quality, but to let you guys, the participants, ask, like you can ask your own body or your own hand, is there any quality that wants to emerge? And that may be different for each person. So then it's like the hand discovering, as I said before, its own path of aliveness. But it's also worthwhile to explore with such a great concept such as healing, in the sense that, of course, healing is a universal kind of, not just concept, but like activity or something. And it'll call forth, usually, if like with a little practice at least, something quite like, it can call forth whatever this particular body, each of ours, needs at any given point. So it's a kind of open idea. What arises when the idea of healing is brought up would be, I would assume, different for each of us. And maybe even very specific to the particular body part that we're working or practicing with. And so, but one thing that I personally find just so like profoundly, for me, actually transformative is when the more I've become familiar with the whole idea of healing. And to me, that was brought into my practice by something that my teacher keeps pointing out, which is that all Buddha figures, like, you know, there are so many different, I have one all over the place. There's so many different kinds of Buddha figures. Some of them sit, some of them stand. They each have very different mudras. Mudras are these little hand positions. And but one thing my teacher points out is that each Buddha and each Buddha figure is basically a medicinal Buddha. The Buddha is always about healing in the widest sense. And so I think the sense of the connection, the relationship between the idea of a Buddha, an awakened one, and the idea of healing, being healed, and well, both at the same time, being healed and healing. By being healed, maybe healing, almost automatically. How awakening into the potential for healing, not just ourselves within ourselves, but also being, just imagine if all human beings were healing presences. We kind of need that nowadays. It's a nice idea, very far from the truth. But something like that. Imagine a person who just is so profoundly, there's, for me, what the presence, the idea of healing evokes, even just in my hand, that's my personal experience, but it's just, that's why I keep wanting to share that one, is just bringing that into my hand. I can sometimes have, sometimes more, sometimes less, but an overwhelming sense of just like bottomless goodness, just such profound goodness, nothing bad in that goodness. And that can be a deeply transformative presence or experience in one's